Less than 30 seconds now in regulation. Could this take extra time? 16 seconds. Here's Dial. Send it up the point, Jay Lalu. Call midget now, but Matt, 6 seconds, 5, Dalfan coming out. He gets around him, 2 seconds. He's got to do it quick. Shoot, the scores, 1 second left.
I need to actually watch the in-game replay of that Matt goal that I play in the intro every time again, because it's been too long. But that's got to be one of the best play calls that anybody's ever done of a hockey question mark play. I'm gonna be honest. It's up there. Winters killed it there, especially
Winters
with the
has
whole
some good
like,
calls.
especially with the whole like last second thing going on. Like, he did such a great job on that one.
I don't think I even remember that, to be honest. It's been so
It
long.
was. I'm pretty sure it was scored against me and my team. So pretty sure. Anyway, we're back with episode 3 now. We decided the last one was 2, right, Tony?
I don't
So
know.
this is 3, not counting the first one.
It's 3 or 4.
Yep, and we're here with Cap this time. Welcome, Cap.
Woo. Thank you.
Woo.
Cap.
Underrated guest.
Yikes, dude. All right, Cap. First question: which is the most overrated Faceoff host?
Can we get Zam's answer at the same time?
Oh,
Nice
yikes.
split down the middle.
We should have got him on here for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
We should have got his live reaction to hearing it.
Right. All right, so by now you probably would have seen our last episode where he sat down and spoke about some of the best and worst draft picks of all time, which Cap, you were featured on there both as a player and as a GM. So
Not
you
good
know.
either way. Did not make a best pick. Oh no, he did. He grabbed Goose. We missed that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
In
You were
season 18.
featured on there 3 times.
Oh, yeah,
times.
let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So
Balance.
congratulations on that one.
Mediocre, just like my career.
Hey, you
I'm
won a
waiting
cup
for
as a
best
GM,
pick.
which is more than I ever did. So
Friday
yeah,
Night
true.
Hockey September season best steal of the draft, whatever. Kapanen, 8th round, 9th round, whatever it was. I don't know.
dude, I'm still upset that my team didn't take you. It's disappointing. But
You know.
Let's wait to release this now. Let's release this one in a few weeks when it's over.
God damn it, Zam! What the fuck? Most overrated GM.
Yeah. It's funny, Jerry said that the other day. Whatever. Probably
Oh
shouldn't
my
throw him under
God.
the bus for that, but
Yeah, not yet.
it was
Give
a joke.
give
It
it
was
a
a
couple
joke
weeks.
anyway.
Till you put in a playoffs for us, then I'll rage about
Yeah.
it.
Maybe I'll have put in a playoffs by the time you're hearing it.
Yeah,
Unlikely.
probably not though.
No, probably not.
Anyway, okay. So the reason why we have Cap on here today is because we wanted to talk about the topic that I believe it was Sully who actually proposed it. We were hoping to get to it last episode. We managed to run an hour and 40 minutes without touching it. So,
Whoops.
per usual with us, we're really bad at this whole time management thing, but that's fine. So this time around, we're going to be talking about some of the most difficult decisions that we made while we were at BOC. Tony, myself, and Cap pretty much represent the BOC on just about every one of the LHL seasons that ever happened. At least one of us was BOC for probably like 90% of them, save for a couple early on and
The
maybe
Matt Super.
yeah, the Matt Super era when 5v5 hit and whatnot. So, but for the most part, we were there for a lot of it. And as I mentioned on the last episode, even when I wasn't BOC, I was largely involved in a lot of those decision-making processes. So I got to experience a lot of that firsthand, regardless of of my status at that point. So we've got some good pain points to bring up, and we'll also try to touch on some of the more general difficulties that came in with being a BOC member, not so much a specific incident, but maybe some recurring themes we had to deal with, or some recurring problems that we tried to solve over and over again and ultimately couldn't do, which I'm sure a lot of you can think of plenty of those things for us to chat about. So we'll see how many we get to. But anyway, Cap, given that you are the guest on here, I don't have a picture up for you on on the video, so that's
We all just
unfortunate. But
remember.
yeah, we can find EvCob's attractiveness power rankings, and you'll see Cap up there towards the top. So don't worry about
Yeah.
it.
Is Quoof near the top too?
I
He
think
is
Quoof was
number
number
one, I
one,
think.
Is
dude.
I could see it. I could see it.
It's an
Tall,
attractive man right there.
dark,
Yeah,
and
that's the thing.
handsome.
He's got
Yep.
over. He's a fucking 6'4".
Yep. It's fucking hot, dude. All right. Anyway, now that we've gotten the casual homosexuality out of the way, Cap, we'll go to
Get
you
into
first.
hardcore. Oh,
Oh, that's for the after show, Tony. Don't
you got to
worry
pay
about
for that. You got to sub to the Patreon to get that one.
It's actually OnlyFans.
Oh, no, we
Go ahead,
switched.
go ahead and check out our OnlyFans at Dial or Dick and Tony, Dick and Dick.
Double dick.
Yeah, double dick
I think that's
down,
taken.
something like that. Anyway, so Cap, let's start with you. We'll throw you under the bus.
All right.
So one situation or topic or decision that you had to make that was really difficult for you. I'm sure there's a couple that come to mind, but
Yeah, I know the one that comes to mind for you is probably the same one for me. Well, in terms of how much you hated it, and that was
allowing BG to play, I agree.
no, no. Considering your potential shot on net a non-goal when it was argued to be a goal.
Yeah, that was
and
fucked up.
I chose to be to rule it as inconclusive.
Do you have the post of that? Does it include a replay?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. You want to
yeah.
post that to me while we're talking
Yeah,
about
one
it? I'm
second,
going to
let me-
show it on the thing so
me-
I can argue in favor of myself live.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it up
You
real
can
quick.
experience
Anyway,
what I did when it happened.
That is a good one, and it kind of like is a representation of a lot of the like difficult or some of the difficult decisions that we'd have to make on a regular basis as BOC, which is, making calls on like G-int and goals
And
like
weird
this.
stuff like this one.
Yeah, the in-game situations were honestly some of the more difficult ones to do, especially when you had to do it like live during a game and figure out like, are we going to OT or anything? Like all that shit
Yeah.
really, really sucked.
Having to play out games in OT was like without getting to know first, like was really weird for a lot of people, I imagine. But
Oh,
like it's just kind of what you
absolutely.
had to do. But yeah, this one was difficult. I mean, I still agree. I'm pretty sure. I'm looking at the GIF of it now.
Yeah, I'm
And
opening it up and I'm gonna flip over to. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is
like
this
as
is the
much as
slowed down version.
like as much as you can say like it probably would have went in off the post, it's just like something that I didn't feel comfortable just assuming would be like the case. I feel like that's the general rule of thumb for like most rulings on goals in real life too, is that like inconclusive
Does this have?
evidence.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. The HD. This will be better.
Yeah, there you go.
Look, that hits the crossbar, right? Goes down, and it hits the inside of the post and then bounces underneath of it. I mean, what the fuck is that, man? Like, what the fuck is that?
I've never seen that happen like on something that wasn't like a puck forced under the post. Like
Yeah.
I've seen the puck go under the post like when someone's forcing it with their stick.
Let's see the
But I
freeze
don't think
frames.
this-
That thing totally I remember this when it comes out, like when it has gone
It
through,
shoots.
it looks like it, like at the angle this is from, the one Trev Crow posted, if that's the one you're talking about, it looks like it comes out the back of the net almost at the start of it.
Yep. Hold on.
Yeah, if you watch Dial's GIF on his comment as well, it also is a good one because it's zoomed in more.
Yeah,
it's so difficult because like you just don't know. Like you don't know if it's gonna go in, and that's why I had to stay with inclusive. Obviously, like it likely would have, but I mean, it's the way she goes, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Where's the GIF I posted?
There's
it's like two or three comments down.
I did a fuckload of them. Holy
yeah,
shit.
you did a bunch of pictures, and then the GIFs at the bottom. That like is like a
Oh,
frame by
look
frame
at the
zoom in.
Oh, I'm getting upset about it again.
Which one?
I looked at the goal line one where I posted a picture using the same textures where the goal counts based on the goal line, and that puck is farther over the goal line than that.
Is abusive.
100%. Where's the fucking screenshot of it?
I don't know.
This is unbelievable.
What
The
season
problem is like
this?
it's in the post when it's there, right? That's the only thing. It's not over the line. It's not in the same spot yet until it's like in the post on the couple frames that you get.
That should have counted.
Yeah, you know.
I will die
See,
on
that's
that
why it
hill.
was such a difficult decision.
I
We're
will
still
die on that
arguing
hill.
about it. What is this?
Still
4
wants
years
that
later?
goal. Wants that goal. There's still a
Yeah.
career goal that's missing.
What's my
from the
career
LHL
stats, Tony?
What are you?
You're like 9 goals from
891
900.
goals.
It
Yeah,
should
you're
be-
9 goals
should
from
be
900. 891.
Should be 892.
Yeah. That doesn't flow off as well as 8 from 900, 9 from 900.
Look,
What did
maybe we'll
Gretzky
go
Gretzky have?
back.
Didn't Gretzky have like 893 or something?
8,
Let's
92
see.
or 94. I think 94.
Oh my god, you left me that close to Gretzky.
894, yeah.
You left me
Yeah.
that close to Gretzky, Cap.
I mean, you would have been closer.
Unbelievable. All right, we need to have one game of season 20.
Yeah, and you got to get 3 in it. You got to get 3 goals. Hey, are you also going
Unbelievable.
to add 2,500 assists in that game?
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. I'm coming for it. Anyway, all right. I've diverged on that one too much, but yeah, just in general, the in-game decisions like that really fucking annoying and really fucking challenging. It was a lot better when we had the in-game replay files and we like had people actively recording the games for that because we did start doing that after a while. Might have been
And
after
this one
that.
was one of them, but
Yeah.
we just didn't have the replay
Yeah.
file for it, which really made it worse.
Having the replay file is huge. I still have a shitload of replay files in my hockey folders from just random
Yeah.
games. So it was always a good idea to record it locally. And I think that's what we used to tell people to do was like just somebody hit record on your team before the game so you can look
Oh,
at it
hey,
after.
can I pick that? Can I change my answer to that? The most difficult thing is getting those replay files from DMs.
For real.
Yeah.
That is like impossible.
Okay. Tony, let's go to you next.
Oh, going to me. All right. The first one jumps out to me, and the easiest one because I like there were a lot of controversial GINTs in my time, not including like that Turney one that pissed a lot of people off. But like I don't really care about that. In fact, I don't really care about any of them, honestly. We ruled on GINTs pretty regularly, and there was always people bitching, but wasn't really a problem for me. My biggest one was in season 18, our season of the fewest signups. At one point, the Vancouver team that Doug was GMing, it wasn't going so well from like a personnel standpoint in the locker room, if you will, and Doug quit on the team and kind of left them with whatever. Kiwi had to come in and GM, and at the same time, D-Man Jerry offered to come in and play, but he had signed up late, so we'd never let anybody in my time into the LHL signing up late, but I saw this as the opportunity to do it. And when I went to the other BOC, they were sort of indifferent on it, and I think they voted one way and the other, and it was up to me to call it. And I felt like it sort of went against the league's best interest to maybe do that, but I didn't think it was that big a deal. And I knew I'd probably get some backlash for it, but I kind of I went through it. I went through with it anyway, and just decided to deal with that. And it was okay for the most part. I got some shit. PK on my team didn't like it. He was mad, and the people who were mad were upset that it seemed like the league wasn't being taken seriously. Which, because in my call, I sort of called it as this is a game, and we're here to have fun, and we don't have a lot of players right now, and whatever. And this is an interesting situation that Doug just put his team in, and I don't want a team to fold and wreck the season because of this. So I tried to save the team, that Vancouver team, with the most minor addition I could, giving them a guy who hadn't played in seasons and seasons, So that was definitely the toughest choice because it came down to me. That's the hardest thing is usually you have a group, the BOC all rules on things together, but that one, it just came down to my call, and I had to make it myself and kind of deal with that. I felt pretty alone doing it, which is, something that didn't ever happen at any other point
Yeah,
in
no, that
all of my
makes
calls.
that makes a lot of sense. And it's the shitty part about that is the precedent that you're potentially setting.
Yep.
Like that's the real concern. Um, like you don't want to set the expectation that when people retire from a team that they're just going to get a free player, right?
Yeah.
So having to
And
work
I
through
think,
that is
yeah,
like,
I think I remember saying that too. Like that was people's concern against it, and I remember saying I might have put it in the post that, hey, this is a one time. Like, don't expect this. Uh, this is a weird scenario where somebody who is of a similar value, a similar player, is trying to sign up to the guy we just lost, and it might not be fair to the other teams, but we whatever it was at the time. It was over 2 years ago probably that this all happened. I don't
yeah,
remember every little detail about it, but I remember the setting a precedent was concerning, and I think I probably in the post established my thoughts on it, which was, don't expect this again.
Yeah. It's tough because like he can't just let it happen though. Like
Yeah.
what the you just like screw over so many people doing that.
Yeah, I did. That was the thing. I made the call to help one team at sort of the expense, I guess. Not even really, but it kind of going against the other 5 teams, including my own, which is, I think, why
Yeah,
PK was upset with it.
but like at the same time, it's like you also don't really want to play against like a handicapped team either,
Yeah.
do you really? Like I don't know. It seems silly to be upset about that at the time, and it still is now to me.
Yeah, and I'm just really glad that they lost in the first round. I didn't have to deal with them winning the cup or something.
That that would have been pretty rough.
Yeah, at least I mean, they did make the playoffs though, so I guess if you miss the playoffs over them, you might be upset. Actually, I think I don't know, Guy cared. I think I asked Guy. I think he was GM in the Chicago team that I think they were 5th seed. I don't think he really had a problem with me doing it. I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he remembers every second of it, after I made that call, and he badmouths me about it still today behind my back. But I'm pretty sure he was like, whatever, no big deal. So yeah,
okay,
that's it for that one for me. Dial.
okay,
I'm pretty
I'll
sure.
I'll go next. So the hardest decision that I was a part of, well, so there's two. I'll get to my, I gotta pick one now, right? Jeez.
Yeah, pick
I'll
one
get
now.
to the one I was actually BOC for. The other one is kind of cheating because I wasn't BOC, but like I may as well have been, I guess. So, but that's fine. So the hardest one that I had to do was during my first season of actually being a commissioner. Season one, I was just in quotes like assisting Taze by doing everything. And then season two, I was actually like a commissioner for the league. And during that season, we actually had to ask one of the GMs to step down because he wasn't able to like be. I think it was season two. It might have been season three, but um, we had to ask Master Schmitty to step down because he had basically not been around enough, wasn't really like contributing in terms of showing up to like GM meetings, and which we used to do almost weekly. We'd have like a GM meeting instead of community
That sounds like a
meetings,
good idea.
where we'd get the GMs together and we'd get the commissioners together and just chat about anything that was like going wrong, work through any issues. It actually did work surprisingly well, and that's what ultimately led to the community meetings, which eventually became a meme by the end. Which, in all honesty, I know a lot of people thought that they were kind of a waste, but at the same time, getting the community together to talk about a lot of the decisions that we were making, I think really benefited us greatly to do that because they got to experience the like insight that we had as to why we were making decisions, and then we got to walk through it with them and potentially work on it and revise things if people brought up good points in counter to that. But anyway, so Master Schmitty was one of the GMs, and he just wasn't he wasn't doing what we needed a GM to be doing, and his team was getting pretty fed up with him. and we ultimately had to basically say either step down or we're removing you,
Yeah.
which was the only time we've ever had to do that with a GM. And let's just say it didn't go over particularly well. Um, his girlfriend was playing at the time, or fiance. I don't know if they were engaged yet at that point, and she went off about it. She was really upset that we had asked to remove them, and there was a whole Reddit post which I've been looking for and haven't been able to find about it, asking for like a proper explanation and everything. So we had to we were hoping to keep it behind closed doors, but it ended up having to be something that we sat down and talked through the whole thing in front of everybody on Reddit, which was a little unfortunate for Master Schmitty's
Schmitty.
sake, but yeah, that was definitely the hardest because Schmitty was legitimately a really, really, really good guy. He was an incredible person, and I had nothing but great things to say about him as a person. But unfortunately, if you can't fulfill the responsibilities that we need from you when it comes to league leadership to keep things going, especially as the GM of a team during a time when things were so volatile in the league anyway, like we really needed better from them. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to make that call. But that sucked. That
Yeah, I
definitely
bet.
sucked. So
I'm glad. Yeah, and also you forget the worst part about that is when he left, he put the curse on the Boston franchise.
true. The
Uh,
Boston Bruins for a very long time were not very successful, and even when they found success in the regular season, because the later Boston Bruins teams in 5v5 were actually not that terrible. They were usually competitive or very good, but none of them ever won a cup. So
you
removing Master Schmitty did curse the LHL Boston Bruins forever.
yeah, and cavalry.
I don't know if that counts, but so that
Curse
was
grounds.
that was my most difficult one. So do you want to go back to Cap or you want to reverse the order?
Yeah. Let's
Reverse
go
the
back to
order.
Cap.
Oh, you're
No,
Reverse
moving.
back
the
to
order.
Cap. He's the guest. He gets his way.
All right,
Yeah.
that's fine. All right, so I guess I'm going again. So
Keep
the
going. I got a few more.
don't worry, I could do this for another hour and 20 minutes easily. Um,
Perfect.
so the other one that was really difficult, which there were community meetings about. I really miss those. To be totally honest, I really miss those.
Yeah.
I can't
But
believe
Saw
I
that the
never
other
did a
day.
GM meeting. That sounds great.
they actually they're really productive, honestly. They
Yeah.
typically were because usually the GMs at that point will take it seriously, whereas sometimes
Hmm.
in a community meeting when there's that many people, sometimes you get the
It
people that
gets
are
a little.
trying to be entertaining and shit, and it can get a little
Yeah.
rowdy. But when you break it down to just the BOC and the GMs, you get 8 to 10 people. That's like a sweet spot of quality feedback that you can get. So but anyway, so I was not a BOC at this point in time, but between seasons four, 5 and 6, there was a lot of pressure, even before that, honestly, to explore the options of moving to 5v5, much like there has been about moving to 6v6 in more recent seasons. But um, I don't want to say most, but there is a big split in the community about whether or not that actually was something we should do. We had done 4v4 for HTML, which came first. We did it for the LHL. We had done it for the RSL, which even spent some time as 3v3. Um, and we had all the international tournaments were all 4v4. All the international leagues like the IPHL, the NGHL, CHL wasn't a thing back then, but all of those leagues were 4v4 as well and still are. So us pushing to 5v5 was honestly a big change in terms of the international hockey community. Um, but there was a lot of people, myself included, that were really strongly against it and were really vocal, saying that it would be a bad idea. And ultimately, it was Super Haklu and Matt that were the two POC members at the time. They had taken over for Taser and myself. I had stepped down in season 3, and Tay stepped down at the end of season 4, and he was there for season 5 into season 6. So one of the first big decisions that the two of them made was they decided it was time to push the community to 5v5 to get more competitive games, which in hindsight makes sense when you look at 5v5 playoff stats and Matt has 6.5 points per game. You can kind of see why you'd want to move it back to 5v5 there. But yeah, I was staunchly against it. I thought it was a bad idea for the community. I thought in general 5v5 cut down too much on the amount of space you had to work with, which just goes to show how much worse we were as players back then, right? That when you add a ninth and 10th skater on the ice, now you're cutting down on all the room everybody has to, stick handle, to skate with it. Like it forces everything to be a bit more confined. And ultimately, obviously, that's been the superior form of play. But yeah, that I thought it was going to be terrible, to be totally honest with you. And I thought it was going to make it harder for people to learn how to play the game too, because again, less room to work with.
Yeah.
So I think the RSL actually stayed at 4v4 for a while and didn't adopt 5v5 right away. But yeah, that was the other one that was so difficult for me that I wasn't even in agreement with it when it happened. So
Yeah. So
Such a
yeah, I think you are right there about the being harder to develop though. Like I think we always talked about making JSL like 4v4, even 3v3.
you
You
Yeah,
need
know, it was
time.
just
You need
yeah.
time
yeah.
and space because a player that's that new, most of the time they have to just kind of skate forward like Taze does and not move the stick at all. So you need space to learn how to do that. And
Yeah.
when you have like not only four skaters on the other team, but also your entire team who at that level are probably all puck chasing too, let's be honest, and not positioning appropriately, like they're all going to clamp down on the space you have to work with as well, just by nature of them not knowing any better yet. So the more room you could give them to work with, the better, in my opinion. But all right, Tony, should we go to you for
Yeah. My second it isn't as good. So I'll just quickly brush on something that's similar. Because I mentioned GNs earlier. I mentioned it just made me think about it. But that last tournament we did, me and Kiwi ran back in January, February. There was a GN at the end of it, which Dial saw. I asked your opinion on it,
I
and
remember that.
yeah, every now and then I still get complained about, or just more like in passing by like Crab to Kill people who were on that team that it
Ugh,
went against because it
dude.
was such a light G. But pretty much everybody else who wasn't on the team, yourself, me, anybody who ever ruled on a GN understands that that was GN. I think the reason that that was such a because that wasn't even a difficult decision. That was like that is GN. That's very clear. And I think people had just gone so long without a GN call that they forgot how like harshly it was called for the majority of the LHL. At least ever since like I took on a BOC role. Like pretty. I don't remember too many GNs getting denied. Like usually it was like if you brush the goalie and he's anywhere near the crease, it's a GN. Like, don't touch him. It's not hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you want to score, even if your best way to score is to hit the goalie and jam it, like you can't. It's a risk. You're taking that risk, and if you touch the goalie when he's anywhere near the crease, it's pretty much a GN. Even if he's behind the net, it would be GN sometimes. And I think people just forgot about that. So that was a pretty rough one, even though it was a pretty standard GN call. It was just I think, like I said, people forget as or not quite 2 years, but a year and a half go by without a GINT ruling. They haven't seen one. They forget how harshly it was always called in LHL. But anyway, so and the only other time as a BOC I ever had any real trouble, besides like wrangling my fellow BOC sometimes, or probably them getting me, back when Guy and Beachy were on, uh, was also season 18. And I mentioned to you guys before we started this, there was a game uh, that was going on. My game was over, and somebody wasn't. I don't think it was a BOC member. I think it was either Guy or Austin. Maybe Austin was BOC at the time, but whoever it was said you should check out this Vancouver New York game, and I hopped in there, and the New York team was like dicking around. They were just not even going for the puck, and Meat Sale was in net backwards, not trying to make saves. Well, Vancouver was just running up the score, and Meat Sale was not allowed to play goalie. He was signed up as forward only. Him and Kiwi had basically that rule created for them.
I forgot about that rule.
Yeah, if by the end you couldn't sign when you signed up for the position to play, that was what you were limited to. You couldn't go outside of that position. So if you wanted to G, you had to sign up and say you would G. And Meat Sale didn't do it, wasn't allowed to G. So as soon as I saw that, I called that game a forfeit because they had iced a player that they weren't allowed to, essentially. And the difficulty came because Vancouver had scored so many points in this, and Ike especially, he probably had like 6 points that he never got because, and it's not Vancouver's fault and it's not Ike's fault. They were just playing a game, it was an illegal play by New York. It was Meat Sale's fault. He was the GM. He needs to know better. And yeah, but I guess that's the difficulty of it, was kind of feeling bad, but it was a fairly easy call. But another one that I made on my own, I didn't even wait for the BOC. The rest of them, I said this game is a forfeit. I put it in as a forfeit. I said there won't be stats right there as soon as I saw it, and I especially didn't like that the effort that, like, Meat Sale was clearly dicking around. Like, he was, like I said, he was backwards, like he was spinning around, and just it was a total joke. So, which is the only time I think I've ever seen an LHL game where that happened. I'm sure they happened back in the day more, but it was a total disgrace. It was like, oh my god, this is a waste of time. But another one I got bitched at, and I was the only one who made the call, so I had nobody else I couldn't shift any blame. It was just, well, I made the call. You just got to deal with it. One
Take the
against
shot.
Vancouver. See, my other one was for them, so I wasn't giving them any. I wasn't playing favorites for them.
I think a lot of people, just as a general commentary, because this is always the case, whether or not you make the right decision or the wrong decision, there's always going to be somebody screaming in your ear about how you're an idiot because you didn't
Yep.
like pick what they wanted. And I think a lot of people who are the biggest victims, or I don't want to say victims, but culprits of doing that, are the ones that have no concept for what it takes to run a league of this many
Mhm.
people. Like, you can't trying to think of a way to do it. Or to say it, but you have to maintain the league's best interest in mind at all points in time. And that's always going to mean that there are going to be decisions you make that are going to negatively impact certain groups of people, and there's nothing you can do about it. Unfortunately, that's just the way things work. Like, there's too many people for everybody to benefit from one decision. Like, somebody has to lose. And yes, that sucks, and yes, that's frustrating. Like, yeah, sorry you didn't get that goal, or yeah, sorry you don't get that save back because it wasn't GN. But like, at the same time, like, fuck off. We have a
Yeah.
league to run, and your one situation is not more important than the rest of that, and it's not more
Yeah.
important than setting and maintaining the precedent of the rules that are being enforced currently. So I
Yeah.
I know
Yeah,
a
that was
lot
one
of
of the
that
biggest
is
difficulties.
I know a lot of that is just the kind of coincidence of the fact that the player base was, on average, pretty young in terms of age and pretty immature as a result. So, a lot of that can be kind of excused to that extent, but like, Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, like these are people you're dealing with here.
Hmm.
It's not just this, and the game doesn't exist for your specific benefit.
No, no, it
Everything is,
exists for
it's not
everybody.
about you.
Yep. And a
Yeah,
lot of people failed to see that, and a lot of people, I think, would intentionally ignore the other side of the argument that was, in the discussion that they're having because they
Mhm.
just don't want to hear that they might be wrong, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Oh,
that's a side point. So
yeah. Oh, by the way, I not related to this one. I forgot, and I forgot to bring it up. That the last topic I talked about, the one with bringing Jerry into the league, I pulled the GMs too, and it all came. I remember it was split with the BOC and the GMs, the votes I got. So
yeah.
it really was just down to me at that last call. That really sucked.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
All right, Cap.
Yeah.
We'll go to you for
My
your
turn.
final your final difficult
All right.
situation that you had to deal with.
Mine's gonna be a two-parter, I think.
Okay, that's fine.
One of them's kind of broad, but just I always struggled with figuring out when to like cross the line to veto trades. That is very apparent in one trade. I think it was Austin for Burn
Austin for tall.
or Tall. Yeah, that's
And
It
what
was
it
then,
was.
yeah.
And
Austin
then
for
Tall for
tall, and then
Burn.
Burn
And then
for
Burn
tall
for
went
tall went
through,
through.
but
Yeah,
Austin for
Yes.
tall did
that was
not.
the upsetting.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
what was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And probably wrong to veto at the time.
Or if you're
Anyway,
gonna
yes.
veto it, I think you got to veto the Burn one too. Is the
Yes,
problem?
yes. It was handled incorrectly in the beginning and then handled properly the second time, which definitely screws over the first
Yeah.
group of trade.
Which is an interesting question too. Not to derail you, but
No,
like,
you're good.
what like, and this is something I was thinking about too with like NHL punishments, right? It's like if you make a decision as the BOC or as like let's say Gary Bettman even, right? And ultimately afterwards you feel like you made the wrong decision for whatever reason, right? You feel like you didn't choose the right thing. Next time, do you do it the same way to maintain precedent, to be
Yeah.
fair, or do you fix
That's
it and do the right thing this time around, but now you've been unfair to the people before and you're acknowledging the unfairness? Like,
Right.
which way do you go? Because, like, neither way is necessarily good, you know?
Yeah, like
Like,
you're gonna
maintaining the
get crap
precedent
for
is
it.
important, and it's good to not, like, be flip-flopping on every single ruling because, like, okay, yeah, as like a neutral party, like, yeah, okay, I'm glad to see you make the right decision this time, but how do I know you're not going to make the wrong decision next time? Department of Player Safety.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the other case, it's like, well, it's frustrating that you made the wrong decision and you're still making the wrong decision and you're not fixing it. Like, how do you deal with that? Like which side of
Yeah.
the coin is better there?
I think the right thing
Yeah.
to do is to always try to do the right thing, especially if that means
Yeah.
like you learned from your previous mistakes. I definitely don't think that was the case here. I definitely still think me and Taze both thought we were right the first time, at least at the time.
Yeah.
Like there was
Yeah. At
only
the
like what, a
time. Yeah.
couple days in between us, or even a day maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah, it
Like
was close. Yeah, I
it
remember you
wasn't.
guys.
It
It was
wasn't that
the
we
argument
learned
was
or
about
anything.
Byrne versus
Yeah.
Austin is what it turned into.
It.
Yeah.
We
I think
definitely
now.
thought we were
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but I
But
don't think
look.
I
Yeah.
was. But
I mean, a big difference to sort of paint the picture there because we're talking about what, season 8, right? Or
seven.
7 or some shit. Like it
11.
was
11.
Or was it?
was it
Oh,
Yeah,
11?
it
was
was
it
11
late?
because it was season 11. That was because
Okay.
that was why you and Taze ended up leaving BOC.
Okay. Yeah,
The
no
whole
that.
controversy about
So
that.
so
Oh yeah.
And I had Austin the RSL in season
Austin
10,
had
the
found
same
some
season.
time as a starting goalie by then, but he had not broken out into his defensive role that we know him for today.
Yeah.
So Austin was still, I don't want to say early in his career because he had been around for a while,
But
but
early in his new defensive
exactly,
skater career.
exactly. So it was really hard to evaluate what his worth
Yeah.
was at that point. And Bern Warnham had been a starting caliber defenseman for the first 10-ish seasons, and this was the start of when he was starting to fall off a little bit and get surpassed by other defensemen in the league. So one was kind of on their way up and was a bit of an unknown. The other was kind of on their way down and was regressing. Whereas Tall had been kind of consistent as a starting secondary forward. You kind of knew what you were going to get from him in most cases. If he was playing with me, he'd be good. If not, he'd suck. So it was hard to evaluate that. And I definitely understand why, I could see why the
Yeah.
difference is there. Byrne has the reputation of being a starting
Yeah.
caliber player. Austin does not. So I can see the difference. But in reality, was it close enough to make it not
Yeah.
worth vetoing? Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
Right.
You know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I see when I think about that one is I can see vetoing Austin at the time for Tall because with Tall, like Dial says, hey, you know what you're gonna get. And Tall, to his credit, the next season playing with Dial, whatever, put up over 50 points. Like Tall was a good player at the time of it, and Austin, you don't really know what you're gonna get. And I remember my perspective of it at the time was I was in the RSL and Austin was on my team, and it was kind of, I think, a difference of, and it's not even blaming. I mean, I blame Taze and Cap back when it happened, but looking back, like
Yes.
it was dumb too. But because I remember us, as in me and Austin, guy, like a lot of the RSL recent into the LHL sort of players, we all knew that Austin was better than Byrne. I drafted Austin over Byrne, and Austin and me won the cup, and we were like, I knew how good Austin was compared to Byrne Warnham, and I think like Guy did, and Dial probably did, being around my team, and but not knowing that one player has surpassed another one in the RSL, like how your BOC, you got a million things on your plate, you're playing on your team, you're doing all kinds of things, like it's not your fault for not knowing that and just going with, well, Byrne's been around, and he was playing like 2 seasons ago or whatever. He's playing however many games last season. Austin didn't. Like I can see at the time not knowing and like why it would happen. I can honestly I can get the Austin Tall veto. It's like it does make sense like why it happened.
It's just like so
Even
that's a factor, and then like there's so many just for other trades. There's so many factors that go into a trade to like try to figure out when it like breaks that line of like imbalance to the point that it shouldn't be accepted type of thing.
Right.
It's always so hard to find that. Like
Right, because like
even doing like fantasy sports trading
Yeah.
in that is like it's so hard to like feel like you should veto a trade because it is imbalanced, but is it enough that it's really screwing over the league? Because that's really what you should be vetoing for. And that's hard to find like that point. So that was one of the harder things for me. It was just when trades happen, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I don't believe I ever vetoed a trade. I think we came in saying we weren't gonna veto trades.
Yeah, because
you
of
came in at that time.
because of that. Yep.
Yeah, we
I
came in said
remember.
And
anything's
trade hasn't
gonna
been
fly.
vetoed since that, I think, right?
'Cause
No,
that-
I don't think a single trade
that-
was vetoed after
That was
that one.
a that was a pretty big point of contention, like that caused not just about the decision itself, but once the second decision came out to allow the burn for tall one, there was, as I'm sure both of you remember, a huge blow up point between like
Yep.
Cap, Taze, myself, and basically like the rest of the community led by like you, Tony, Guy, and BG. And that's what ultimately resulted in the three of you taking over for the three of us as BOC when we left at the end of that season, because we were like, you know what, fuck this, we're out. Like, we're done. Have fun with
There
it.
was just so much going on already in the league at that point. It was just like so much to worry about.
Yeah,
and a
that-
fuck up like that was. I mean, it was a
'cause
fuck up. So
that season was the start of, or that season had been particularly painful in terms of a lot of like just small stupid bullshit that had to be
Is
dealt
that the
with.
season Claude stepped down as GM and got traded to fucking
I
Toronto?
don't know if it was 11, but it's around there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know,
Where
maybe like
Claude,
10.
where Claude I fucking forgot about that.
That might have been 10 though. I don't know, but it was
So,
in that.
well, that was another
range.
painful one where we had to say whether or not a GM could step down from his
And
team
get traded.
and then get traded to another team. Like
That
I
was
know,
insane.
yeah, like there's a little bonus nugget for you because that was just such a pain in the ass. Trying to like work out the fairness of that. I think that was fucking like season 9 or some shit.
no, season 9 was me on Tampa. I don't think we traded.
Yeah,
Claude
no,
away,
yeah,
okay,
although we
that's
wanted to.
season 9 was the time where he
Yeah, I
season
brought
9
that
was
up
the
in the
time
one
where
you
he
weren't here, Cap.
GM'd and didn't step down.
Yes, but he just didn't show up a lot, and we won all the games he
You're
didn't
right.
show up
You're right.
for.
And it was, you're right. It was season 11. Season 11 was the time where he was a GM and stepped down because Johnny Hockey took over as GM at that point when
Yeah.
he stepped
Yeah.
down. And
Is that 10 or 11? Sorry.
that was 11. So it's the same
Oh,
season.
that was 11,
It was
yep.
all part of the same season. That's what I mean. Like that season was just a fucking shit show of just stupid stuff the whole time. And oh my God, like we had so many issues. Like even outside of me being on Chicago as a team, which had its own issues of every goalie fucking disappearing. But we had
Yeah,
a bunch
that was a
of
wild season.
yeah, we had a bunch of players that like refused to play and then like
Oh,
disappeared.
and Jabba was
and-
the GM of that. Remember, Doucette took over that team.
Yep. Java stepped down from GM as well, but at least like didn't get traded, and Doucette took over.
Oh my
And like
God, that is like one
yeah,
of the wildest seasons
that
of all
that
time.
whole season was just like, it was stressful. So to add the trade vetoes on top of that was kind of like, okay, we're done. We're done here. We've had enough.
It was not great. All right, so my second one was not really a difficult decision that was made, but I mean, I guess sometimes it's more just trying to find like when you needed to bring innovation to like the league to like try to
When
like
you need
spark
like change things up or
yeah
reinvigorate people.
So like basically like 5v5 going into season 18, I think it was. I suggested doing a GM buy-in to where like GMs paid for a GM slot, and then their money would either go towards the servers or like reward the winning teams or something like that. And just like something along those lines. Always just trying to figure out like when to actually pull the trigger on something like that. to try to make the league more fun or different enough to like entice players to come back for more. Because like that was the big problem. Obviously, you guys know in like season 10 and up is just trying to keep players entertained and stay signing up.
Yep.
So things like that and expanding the league or changing the conferences and divisions, just trying to figure out when it was the right time to do something like that was always really difficult and something
Yeah.
that needed to be done, but like was always so hard to find.
Well, and Tony,
Yeah.
you experienced some of that too, which I don't want to get too into it because we'll save it for its own episode here. But with the snake draft stuff kind of
Mhm.
falls into the same boat. And that was, if I remember correctly, the first season that you Guy and BG took over as
Yep.
GM. You guys implemented a snake draft for the following season, or for that upcoming season was season
Yep.
12, which resulted in overall like the bottom four teams were really close and the top two teams were close, but the gap between the top two and the bottom
Yeah.
four was huge.
And the top two were the 6th and 5th, the two teams that
That
benefited the most. That was not
yeah,
looking at the GMs that season. That was not the season to do it. Like Snake might work depending on like we probably looked at the depth of the draft, and I can
the
see it. Like it makes sense when you look at how the draft plays out that you'd want to snake that due to the lack of talent that becomes apparent in the season 12 draft, which is
well, so
probably
that
one of
was
the
the
weaker
problem,
drafts.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
is
but that's just not the that wasn't the season to do it.
yeah.
I don't remember if I was really for it. I've been pretty against snake drafts ever since then,
I
and
mean,
I don't.
we
I
did a
genuinely don't know
fuckload of
why.
mock drafts. We did
Yeah,
a fuckload.
like
I remember that.
it doesn't. It never really comes out well for
Which
some of the teams.
which
Like
is
it
another thing
stacks
that's
teams.
important to mention too, as former members of the BOC. Like I can speak for at
Mm-hmm.
least the three of us in saying that the decisions we made were not done so on a whim. Like we never just made a casual decision to be like, oh, it's 5v5 now. Oh, we're gonna
Yeah.
snake draft now. Like there was legitimate thought put into every one of those decisions every single time, especially with the snake draft example I brought up, where I can tell you Tony and I probably
We.
sat down and did
Yeah.
20 fucking mock drafts of that shit, trying to be as fair as possible to go through it to see if it would work out. So there was a lot of effort that was always put into those decisions to make sure that
Yeah.
we were at least doing something that wasn't going to be catastrophic,
Yeah.
to
Which
put
I
it
think
that
is
way.
why it snakes later. It doesn't snake right at the second in season 12 and 13. It
Yeah,
it it only snakes till later because I think it looked too rough, which it didn't
yeah,
crap got that pick anyway, so it
yep,
doesn't matter.
yep. So,
Get into trade vetoes again, maybe.
which in fairness, that season was a little bit better, I think, in terms of the snake draft. Like that definitely seemed to be an improvement, skipping the second round snake and
Yeah.
starting it in the third.
13 does the same thing.
That's what I'm saying. Like starting
Yeah.
at 13, right? That definitely was the play to do it there and start it like that. And I think even 14 wasn't 14 the same shit.
Mm, was it? Could have been.
Yeah, 14 was. 14 was also a late snake. We did it after
Started the
the
fourth.
yeah yeah.
Yeah.
So we pushed it even later, which at that point is kind of like, I mean, what's
Yeah, then we
like what is it?
stopped.
Yeah,
It's at
like what
that
does it
point why
matter?
bother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for sure, like it's the first two rounds typically, which is commonly the case with most LHL drafts, and I don't know what the RSL drafts ended up looking like because I wasn't present for most of them. But for the LHL drafts, you typically have like tiers of players, and those tiers don't always line up in even sixes. So you could have a tier of like, you've got the S tier players like the autos of the world and whatnot, but maybe you've only got three of them available in the draft, which means only three of the six teams get that. Then maybe you have your next tier of like the really good players, but not the elite ones. So like, I don't know, like the Dick McButts of the world, the BGs of the world, right? Like the players that are going to be difference makers, but not going to necessarily carry your team 100%, right? So then you get a tier of those. Maybe that could be six people. Like, okay, now you're most of the way through the second round, but what happens at the bottom of the second round? Well, now you're into like the good but not great players. It's like, okay, like the balance in talent there was so spiky constantly throughout the LHL, where you just keep hitting these plateaus and then it's a big drop off, and then a plateau and then a big drop off. And that always made it difficult to make like the right decision when it came to draft stuff, including like the order that the GMs were going to draft in, right? Like all that gets
That was always
factored in.
tough.
All of that gets factored into like how do we set this up properly, which I mean that poses its own problems, right? How do you compare a goalie to a skater, right? Like how the fuck are you supposed to do that, right? You know, in season 14, to keep using that as an example because I just mentioned it, right? Meatsail is a goalie. We had him picking at third out of 6, and above him we had Guy, and above that we had Cap. It's like how do you determine like
I
where
just
to
won the
rank
cup the last
those?
season
Like, you
as a
know,
GM.
it's it's just it's challenging. So, and then you get into like the following season afterwards, where we had the one time ever that we had a non-playing GM.
Yeah, and that was the protections time. Was not the season to do it. Botched that one. Yeah, that's actually probably the most difficult decision is choosing to keep protections because we were like we're doing it and we have this prospect system and then Guy and Otto tore the league a new one and we're like do we go back on it? Do we wuss out of this
I
or do we
miss
just
the
push through?
I miss the prospect system in all honesty. I genuinely thought that the
That
prospect
should have
system
stuck.
was actually like beneficial to do it that way.
Yeah.
Um, it was an evolution on what used to be 1 day contracts. For those who don't remember what 1 day contracts were, it was if your team doesn't have enough people to show up that night, you can go out and sign an undrafted player, like an unrostered player for that signed up for the league anyway, like was there present at the draft but didn't get taken to an LHL team. You could go sign an RSLer in that category to fill in for one night. And they wouldn't get added to your roster permanently. You wouldn't have to drop anybody, but they could play for you for that night. So that was something that we did. We had some limitations, like a 1 night player like that or 1 night contract couldn't play for multiple teams in the same night, as an example. And I think they could only play in 2 games a week. I believe that was the case. But anyway, so that kind of evolved into the prospect system that a lot of you probably remember, which kind of served to fill a similar point, almost like a practice squad or you know something equivalent of that. If you're familiar
Yeah.
with the NFL, where you would have these players that are on your roster, but somebody can sign them to their main roster while they have the prospect designation. So every team had 2 prospects, and then they had 9 regular roster spots. So if you wanted to steal somebody's prospect, you could do so, but you had to sign them to your top 9 first. So I thought that was really interesting and added a whole nother dynamic, which is yet another conversation for a future episode about sort of team building and trying to make decisions as BOC to set the league up to be able to do that because that was always something that I thought was really cool and would have added another dynamic to the LHL, being able to carry over a franchise from season to season. And we tried it a couple times, but
We
unfortunately
were
with
gonna
the
do it at the end if we rolled into 20. That
yeah,
was
which
the
I was
plan.
you know I'll get into that in a second, right? But every like fucking every season that we did that, there'd always be some pairing of like 2 players that would be way too overpowered, and it'd be like, well, we can't do protections, but tell them that they can't do protections, so we just have to scrap it, which
Yeah.
is another side effect of that sort of tier of talent. Where in the LHL, it's sort of always been the case that you get 2 superstars or 3 superstars on a roster, you're a cup contender. If you have 1 or fewer, you're not, and being able to carry that through from season to season was almost a death sentence to the level of competitiveness in the league, which, given the lack of influx we had of new players throughout the course of time, was always a big concern because if it's the same teams winning over and over again and all the same players can't get onto those teams because of protections, they're eventually going to burn out and stop playing, and we couldn't afford to lose those people. So unfortunately, those decisions that had to be made were made to retain people for as long as possible. But that was always something that I wish we could have executed properly. And I think the season 19 to 20 strategy actually would have been really good, where we had taken sort of the like keeper strategy from what you'd find in like fantasy hockey or football or something, where you can keep a player going into the next season, but you have to give up a draft pick 1 round higher than where you took them the season before. So
Oh
if you
yeah.
picked a player in the 4th round and you kept him into next season, it would cost you your 3rd round pick. If you picked a player in the 3rd round, it would cost you your 2nd round pick. And we had some limitations on that. I think you could only keep 1 player from rounds 1 through 3, and then one player
Yeah.
from 4 through 7 or something.
Yep.
And then
Mhm.
we had
Well, you can't protect a first rounder. It was
well, that's
two
what I was
through. It
gonna
was
say.
probably 2 through 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you pick somebody in the first round, you couldn't protect them because you can't give up a 0th rounder, right? And then you couldn't protect somebody that you picked in the second round because you weren't allowed to forfeit a first round pick.
No,
So
you could protect the second. You
are you
couldn't
sure?
do
Yeah,
it
I thought
twice.
it's
Yeah.
just you weren't
You
going
could
to
protect the
most
second.
likely.
Yeah, it was you'd have to give up your first to be able to protect your
okay,
second.
okay.
And if you wanted to do it again the next season, you couldn't
Then
do
you
it because
can't.
the
Okay.
plan
Yep,
was if
that
we
makes
kept
sense.
going every season, they're worth 1 higher.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
Yep. So that I think
it's a really
would
good
have
idea too.
that would have
I remember.
worked a
I
lot
think I
better.
came up with that, and I remember being pumped, running in, telling everybody about it.
I,
I was
I
like,
think
I got a good idea.
I think that would have worked a lot better because it would have enabled the ability to still maintain a franchise, so to speak, while not making it so unbalanced that you're going to have a dominant team every time. Because that top tier of talent, like we're talking about, that fills out the top 2 rounds, pretty much going to be recycled every season.
Yeah,
There's going to be a change in it every
autos
single
in the
time.
draft.
So yeah, so that at least makes things a little bit different. And then if you can go that route, you can start to explore things like, okay, let's have a draft order based off the previous season standings. So now, okay, Otto just won the cup with Calgary. Well, guess what? Calgary's last pick. The guy doesn't get to keep Otto anymore. Now Otto goes to the top of the order. And now, okay, Los Angeles was the first place team. I'm just using season 14 right now. Los Angeles was the first place team. So Lucic gets first dibs at
Last
Otto.
place.
Or yeah, they'd be first order in the draft. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Lucic now gets Otto. That completely changes the entire dynamic of the season, which would have been really interesting. But Guy could have been able to keep Kiwi for a first round draft pick, or keep Tony for a second round draft pick, or keep Austin
I
for a
would have
third round
also been a
draft pick.
first. He took me in the second as a trade up. Wouldn't have been
You
worth.
you get the point. You get the point, right? So it would have made things interesting
Yep.
because every draft at that point is not just about what am I doing this season. It's about what am I doing for the next like 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And that actually allows you, especially if you're in a first place team, that allows you to make decisions like, okay, at the trade deadline, I'm going to give up some talent to not like necessarily intentionally tank, but basically tank, right? To go down in the draft and focus on rebuilding for the future, which is something that 1 or 2 GMs tried to do early on in the OHL back in like season
Like
4.
Matt.
Yeah, like Matt did it. Super Hot Glue did it with Ev Cobb's team.
Well, we say
Attempting,
did it. Matt tried to tank, and then he won the cup with his RSL roster
yep, and then
because
was
he was
able to
so good.
draft me, and then
And then he got you.
yeah, yep.
And
So
then that's why we never had protections in future pick trading ever
yep.
again.
So like that would have been, I think, really, really cool. And I think that would have helped entice more GM
Yeah.
talent, which was always a problem that we had. Like that's another frustrating thing as BOC,
Yeah.
right? Finding good GMs to fill out the spots every time
Well, but
was a
also
legitimate challenge.
the
And
scary part of it is though on the same thing the thought of the GM not coming back, and you just
correct,
have to
correct.
somebody has to deal with the mess that's been
Yeah,
left by.
no, which happened as part of
Yeah.
it. We were talking about the season 4 to 5 thing, right?
Yeah,
With
that
Matt
yeah.
winning season 4 while trying to tank, and then getting me season 5. The reason why he got me season 5 is because during season 4, when he was trying to tank, he traded away Taser and Notlet at the time, both for first round draft picks in the upcoming draft. So Matt came into the season 5 draft with 3 first round draft picks after having won the cup.
Yeah, and so he
And
traded a couple of them
so
for you.
exactly, he traded a couple of them for the rights to me in that offseason to protect me. He traded, I think, 2 and a second or something like that
Yeah,
to
that's
protect me.
awesome.
And he traded it to, now here comes the downside to it, right? He traded them to Quoof, who was the GM of my team season 4. Quoof, after trading me, decided to step down from the team because he didn't want a GM anymore going into next season. So guess what? Goose stepped up and Goose got to GM the team,
Oh,
but now Goose doesn't have the ability to protect me anymore. Goose had extra first round picks because he got traded them for me, but now he's completely rebuilding a team from nothing. And Phoenix, the team that I was on in season 4, was one of the later picks in the draft because we were the second seed. So he was starting from a shitty draft position, even having extra first round picks, and didn't have an elite forward to start with. So Goose
And the
was
draft is weaker in these days, especially
exactly
because all the
of
good
the
players were
protections.
protected. Yeah.
Exactly. So huge props to Goose for being willing to take that on, because that was a really difficult situation and a really shitty one to have to
Yeah, hell yeah,
accept.
Goose.
So big props to him for doing that, because I know a lot of people wouldn't want to. Unfortunately, his team didn't end up making the playoffs, which has its own controversial GM decision behind
Is
it.
that
But
Boston or is that
that was
Brooklyn?
Brooklyn.
Oh, the Brooklyn.
Yeah, they did not make the playoffs on a very controversial illegal substitution call, uh, which I may or may not have scored a goal on. So
I think I've seen it. I
no,
think I've seen this one.
there was a lot of frustration there around that. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. But yeah, so he did everything he could at the time to work back the team and get something meaningful out of it. But yeah, it was a shitty situation to say the least, to be able to do that. So at least the positive thing was we were able to keep all the teams coming back for the next season. But I think as far as GMs that came back, it was like Matt and Bo and
Did
Tickle
Leafs do it?
and Leafs. Matt, Bo, Tickle, and Leafs were the four GMs that retained their spot, and then the other GMs did not. So
The one went to Super, right? That's the Minnesota season, probably the worst ever
yeah,
team.
that was Buffalo Sabres beforehand, which
That way,
traded.
is that the Tays one?
That's the one that Tays and Timu were
They
on.
traded their for fucking picks for
Yeah,
Tays.
they traded. Yep. So
Oh
Evcobb
my
sold
god.
out, which again is interesting from a league perspective, right? It's cool to see that happen.
Yeah,
He had a playoff contending team, but they weren't in a position to be winning the cup. They were still like notably behind the top teams. They were the like fourth or fifth seed. So they traded away their first round draft pick to get Timu. So now it was Evcobb, Timu, and Tays as the core of the team, because they didn't have like a great goal scorer before that. So bringing in Timu, who's a prolific goal scorer, right, solves that problem. Well, they
I
managed to
disagree.
get up.
Tays scored 60 that season.
Well, yeah, Tays was very good, but like bringing in Timu obviously is
Yeah.
is a big deal, right? So they were able to bring him in, but unfortunately they ended up losing in the first round and got swept.
Did Matt get them?
It
That'd be great.
was not Matt. It was actually
Oh,
Boston. It was
oh,
Boston who was the
that
fifth.
sucks.
So the top, we did a 16 playoff. The top two teams, which were Toronto and Phoenix, wasn't even Matt's team. It was Go Leaf Go's team and Leafs team, or sorry, Go Leafs Go's team and Quoof's team that had buys. Chicago played Anaheim, Buffalo played Boston, and Buffalo as the higher seed got swept. So they lost in the first round despite selling out all of their picks, and then Evcobb stepped down the following season.
Yeah.
So not only did Goose have to take over, but Evcobb had to take over for, or I mean, Super had to take over for an even shittier position in fucking Buffalo, which became the Minnesota Wild, who were one of the worst LHL teams to ever exist.
Yeah.
So yeah. But anyway,
there's the downside of protection. Anyway, that all came
right, but
from
that's
Cap
but
talking
that's
about
part
when to
of
do innovation.
but that's yeah, and
There's an
I
answer.
I
Switch to
completely
5v5 and no more pick trading after that.
I completely fucking jacked Cap's point and hijacked it and turned it into something completely different. So we'll get back
That's
to that
okay.
one sec. But that is part of what's interesting about real sports, though, is the
Yeah.
dynamic changes season to season, and that's part of what makes it fun to follow a franchise and follow a team, because it's not just a one-off. It's something that you're invested in for multiple seasons at a time. And I think in terms of like generating any kind of fandom at all. Not that that's like an easy thing to do with this game, right? But getting people invested into the success of like their favorite players or their favorite teams or their friends and whatnot, being able to do that is way more interesting when you have those dynamic changes season to season. And it's all the more reason to try to add these new sort of like invigorating changes to the league that make it more fun. But you have to be really careful, because there's a fine line there between making a change for the sake of making a change and making a change because it genuinely adds something to the league. And that's where you
Mhm.
start getting into like the let's add rules, let's add 6v6. And Cap, I'll throw it back over to you now because I just took the last 10 minutes for
Nah, you're
myself
good.
there. But
No, yeah,
More than 10.
it's tough because
I don't want to talk
there's
about it.
so many things that like I probably don't even remember and can't think of that we probably discussed at one point to try to like add more fun to the league or add more interest to the leagues that just were never even ran through the community or even the GMs at the time, because like it's just so hard to like come up with something that's so solid that will keep the league working properly and still add more depth to the league as well.
Yeah, I feel.
And it's
And
tough.
you're talking about the rules and everything, and I remember being like, that was probably the only time 6v6. Those are really the only discussions that I ever remember having about like big league changing. Besides like protection, but I mean in terms of actual like gameplay, is
Yeah.
the rules in the 6v6 were the only things I remember ever having discussions about. And I always got the feeling when it was talked about whether like somebody was, or especially when people were pro when they were for it, is so it seemed like people they never had a good reason to make the switch. Nobody was ever like, I don't like 5v5 or I don't like the way the game is played right now. It was like, let's change it.
Yeah,
Let's change it.
exactly. Yeah.
Let's just
Yeah.
change this. And I
I think
remember thinking, this doesn't
I
like, it
think I
doesn't seem
was
right.
a proponent for the rules
Yeah.
being like offsides or icing at the very least, because I thought it could have added a very interesting dynamic to the gameplay or the flow of
It
the
would
game at the
change
very
it.
least.
Yeah. I see.
And
I don't like that it would. I didn't like the idea of changing the flow. I thought it would cause more stoppages and it would kind of wreck it.
Yeah,
Right.
That's my main reason for not
that was
liking the
always
rules.
my
it was
Honestly,
problem
is
was
I don't like the stoppages.
that was always my
it
problem was
was
the number of
yeah.
stoppages and the fact that you could completely abuse it by having the goalie change positions after the like as soon as the puck drops,
That's why it
have
sucked when
them
Oh
we
yeah,
started
things like
yeah,
that weren't
have
going to
them
be allowed. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
exactly, but like it's still a pain in the ass. Like obviously it's not allowed, but you still need
Yeah.
somebody there to admin it the whole time because we had teams in the couple of like, we did tournaments or a tournament or something to test it out.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
rules.
And
And they were doing that.
we had like I think it was Marchie was just exploiting the fuck out of it. Like he'd
Yeah.
he'd
Yeah.
be in G and then he'd
And
just
he's
set right D so he could force an icing when it's completely undeserved or like force
Yeah.
offsides and shit.
I
Like
think
it was so fucking stupid.
I think I
yeah.
proposed offsides only or until
Yeah.
like
Well,
icing
people
was
talked about
fixed
that.
or
I
something
never
like
think
that.
I didn't think that ever got to a point where you could
Yeah.
choose one or the other.
I
I just
honestly I don't think you can have offsides without icing just as a
No,
separate
you need them
discussion.
both.
The rules
Is when you
are
enable it.
built to like support one another. Like they're
yeah.
both intertwined. If you have one without the other, you're just either exploiting the defense or exploiting the offense. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't just have one.
I think the idea was it would have made a really interesting team dynamic where
Yeah. People
but
like the idea
it
of
would
the team play more.
it had to enforce like improved team skill basically.
Yeah.
And that was always something that would have been really cool to try, but I don't think we had the level of play to even do
Yeah,
that
I
anyway.
still don't think we have it
No,
as
no,
much as people
no.
play. It's I don't know. It's weird. Like it's funny
Zone's
with such
too
a small
tiny.
community. It's such a small community. You just don't have the talent. Like
Yeah.
even the good players can't do stuff that you need them to be able to do, or
Mhm.
all of them at least. Juice could probably pull it off. Juice and Paco could have done it.
Just clone them.
Yeah, just get if you had 4 of them for each team, you could do it, but we don't. Or Matt back in the day, he could have dealt with all that. I don't know. Yeah, but that was the only one I remember ever really coming up. I mean, I'm sure more stuff came up that we had to choose
But
on that would
yeah,
have changed
like
the league, but those were the only ones gameplay wise.
Oh, I'd
and
love to do
that's kind of
buy-ins.
the
Yeah.
big thing too, right? Like all the stuff that we've spoken about so far today on this broadcast, if you've noticed, all the changes we've discussed, everything we brought up, and all the ones we haven't too yet, are all things that happened outside of the game. There were very, very, very few changes that ever went through in the course of the LHL history regarding like gameplay itself and changing the way that we do things within the game. We kept that as stagnant as possible because the game was good as it was, in all honesty. And
Right.
making changes to the way the game played or was played is a much more volatile like change to make than doing something simple like okay let's change the way the teams are drafted or something like that. Like that's a lot easier to do while still refreshing things more without the
Right.
risk of destroying the actual gameplay or just making it a huge pain in the ass. So
Almost forgot that we did the double games on game days as well.
And
That
19.
was that was like
Yeah.
the last. Well, obviously the last big change was last season, but that was like one of the big changes I guess you made, Tony, as well.
Yeah, we
Was-
would have been BOC probably calling that one.
Yeah, and that was I feel like that potentially could have made a lot more people more interested if we did it earlier on as well. I feel like
I was worried about it when we did that last. Well, not the last face off now. The first one, I guess, if we're calling it that. I brought that up briefly to
The
Dial that I
prequel?
was. Yeah, no, the first one,
Oh, okay.
not
Okay.
after the
Episode one.
prequel.
Yeah.
Yeah, episode 1 is that I was worried that might have lost interest, that some people didn't like that, and that is, and it's funny because you look at season 19 scoring is insane and the goaltending's really bad, and we always question that, and I really wonder if playing double games had some sort of impact on that, if it warmed skaters up or something,
Yeah, I
Or-
think
See, I think if
less
that were
scrims
the case,
happened.
though, I think if that were the case, you would have seen, like, we would have noticed a similar trend in playoff games. Because playoff nights were the same thing. Every playoff night, you have back-to-back games. You're
Mhm.
always playing at
Yeah.
least two. And I think if you go back, and admittedly, I haven't done this, so I can't say with certainty that it's not the case, right? But if you go back and look at every game, or look at most playoff games, and take a look at the scoring for the first game of the series for that night, and then the second game of the series for that night, I'd be really interested to see if the scoring went up in the second game every time or stayed the same, or was roughly similar, because that would sort of lend credence to that thought that you have, Tony, where like you get kind of a warm-up game for skaters and then they're in the flow of it the next game, and the second game is more explosive as a result. So I'd be interested to see like how much of a trend that holds up, because if that is the case in the playoffs, then you might be right.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never looked at it. I never checked the playoffs like that.
I noticed going back through them at one point that most of my teams ended up losing the first game of every night in the playoffs, like in previous seasons. But we would then win the second one. Like I know Dallas did that. I know Boston did it, and I think one other team also did that.
Yeah,
So that was always interesting. I think some teams just take a little bit to get going, and with 2 games a night, I think the problem was that people wouldn't even be willing to scrim one game sometimes. But in saying that, I think that was also just a lack of interest at the time in season 19 more than
Agreed.
anything. I think people would have been willing to scrim twice before 2 games back in like season 8 and 10 and whatnot.
agreed.
I think that was kind of one of the pros. I think a lot of us were sort of sick of scrimming so much. But well,
Mhm.
at least getting on early. Like it was such a time commitment by the end of the game, where you'd be getting on an hour early to practice,
I
and then
think
do some scrims, and then play 2 games.
I think 3 games in a night was the sweet spot in terms of like you get a scrim, you get
Yeah.
a real game, you get a real game. I always
Yeah, I
thought that
agree.
was like the best place to do it, because a lot of times when we had only one game, you'd play 2 scrims anyway, like pretty
Yeah,
frequently.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
like having
That
one
was
solid hour of playtime was usually good for me, or at least I thought anyway, because then I'd usually practice for at least a half hour to an hour before that. So you get about an hour and a half to 2 hours in a night of HQM, and that was ideal for me. Like that's about the amount that I'd be comfortable sitting through it in one session most of the time. So,
yeah,
and
that's why
obviously a lot of people don't feel that way, but
that's why I genuinely think it would have helped keep some people interested longer, honestly, if we did it sooner, is because of the fact that like a lot of people invested so much time in this game for only 1 game a night. And to be like rewarded with 2 games a night instead for investing that much time probably would have felt better. I don't know
it makes it a lot
how
easier to
much, but
justify taking out or like setting
right.
aside plans for that
Yeah,
night. Yeah,
skipping plans
Yeah,
or
and
something like that to play
I'm
it.
sure if a league ever came, like a real league, not like this Friday Night Hockey league, but like if a league ever came back, we wouldn't do 1 game a night.
Oh,
I'm
for
sure
sure.
we would
Yeah.
do multiple.
Just makes it more worth.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Speaking about things that might have perpetuated interest, one thing we haven't touched on at all in any of these yet, I don't think, is the community, or I guess for that one season anyway, the BOC designed teams, not using NHL teams anymore. I mean, I know a lot of people had really mixed opinions on that. Obviously, like if you don't like the teams that were chosen, I don't give a shit. That doesn't matter to me whether or not you
Yeah.
like them or didn't like them. But what was interesting to me was whether or not you thought it was a good idea or whether or not you thought it was a bad idea. Should we have done it earlier? Like those types of things were more interesting to me. like I know you guys were obviously in support of like implementing them because you were a key part in doing it
Yeah.
alongside me and a couple others, right? Thank you, Erica.
We're on the
But
committee.
chop chop.
Oh
But
yeah, that was good.
so anyway, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, do you guys think that's something that would it like obviously we all agree that it probably should have been done sooner. I think most people will be on board with that. Um, but do you think
I
it
think that
would
was
have
most people's problem, is it came too late.
do
Yeah.
you think it would have made a difference? Like, do you think there's anything that would have come from that that would have
Not doing it or doing it
changed?
earlier?
Either or.
I in my head, I can't imagine in any circumstance someone lost more interest in the game due to the team names that were chosen or the logos that were
You'd be
chosen.
surprised. I know about interest. I've had people talk to me about that, like even
Yeah,
so much
I
as
get
recently.
not
It's
liking that
weird.
because it's subjective, but losing
Yeah.
interest in the game itself over the
Yeah.
visual and the stat sheet basically is all it really comes down to.
Yeah, it's literally
Is very
meaningless.
I really can't imagine people genuinely didn't want to play anymore because of that. So like
No.
that I think implementing it way sooner was definitely would have helped at least somewhat because it allows because the implementation was that we put 6 stock teams and if you came up with a better design and
You
brought
want
it
to come
to
up with
us
your own
and you
team.
wanted to use it, have at it, but we would have to approve it first. If
Yeah,
that would have
those
been
6
done
teams
way
just
sooner,
existed to be the base.
people would have been more invested, I feel like, in the teams as well, instead of just being like standard NHL teams that people keep recycling over and over again. Like
Yeah,
I wonder.
genuine
and
custom teams would help.
the reason why we did the NHL teams in the beginning was because we always wanted to separate the LHL from the HQML and saying that
Right.
like this is the competitive, more professional
Mhm.
like league between the two. Like this is where you come to put in your best effort, you're showing up for your team, you're taking it seriously, you're not just, skirting by like half-assing it. Like that's was the intention that we wanted to display. And I think we definitely established that pretty early on and probably could have started moving away from that much sooner than we did. And I personally think we might have been able to, if nothing else, attract more GMs that would have been interested in not only like just GMing, but also potentially returning for multiple seasons. Because if they can create
they
their
came
own
up with a team,
franchise, it's something for them to get invested in, and it's something for them to care about more than one season at a time because it's their creation, right? So
Something I wonder though about it killing it is it's good. It's all well and good to have done it earlier and think that it may be like you're probably right. Like it probably would have brought more GM involvement. But when we did it, honestly, the reason of having more of an effect on ending the game than anything that I'm just wondering now. Never put two thoughts towards it until this moment. Is when we did it in season 19. I wonder if putting all that extra effort in those teams and trying to do the shirts and everything. I wonder if that because at some point during season 19 we all knew this was going to be it, and I wonder if we worked ourselves a little too much trying to push that, and we did way too much, spent too much of our effort on it, and maybe didn't think it was worth it by the end that we put so much time into that. I'm just wondering if
Maybe,
that
but
might have
at the
ended the
That-
LHL a little earlier.
I think
than
we went into that season like
Yeah.
into the draft anyway. Once the finalized like player sheet came through, I think that's kind of where we knew it was likely not gonna go much further unless we really like push for recruitment.
Yeah, I feel like that whole
and-
season,
Yeah,
like season
bringing
19,
people
is that
back.
we were really pushing for, like, we were trying to get a bunch of players.
We were trying,
to do something interesting. We added
Yep.
game days. We were trying we were going to talk about protections, and we came
yeah,
up trying to come up with a system. I think we were throwing everything we could to try to
Yeah.
save it, and
It-
We're just trying to bring
realized at one
old
point
players
we did.
back.
in
Basically,
in
is what it really
hindsight,
came down
it
to.
definitely has the like scent of being a desperation play for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody can reasonably say that we didn't put in the effort to try to make that season and the future as a result as good as we possibly could. Like
Yeah.
there was a
I
shitload
think if
of
we'd done one more, it would have been pretty cool. I think season 20 would have been good if we did it right then. I mean, like I wasn't at all. I stepped down
Yes.
POC, and I wasn't gonna
Yeah.
play. I knew I was done, but like I'm
Yeah.
saying, see if we
Yeah, I
had
was
had
done
the
as well.
interest,
Yeah, I was done as well.
Yeah,
But
if the BOC and if Dial had the interest, like season 20 would have been pretty cool.
If we
what
could have
you
got returning players, I think season 20 would have been one of the really fun
Mhm.
seasons.
Yep.
With how the whole like league layout and format went.
what you bring up is a good point though, because like seeing all that work go in and then just
Yeah.
knowing that like the likelihood of next season being a thing or being successful was so low, definitely was a demotivating factor. I never really
I never
thought of
thought
it
about
that
that
way,
either.
but
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
can
did. I
certainly
literally
see
was
how
thinking about
that
it when you were describing it.
yeah, I can certainly see how that like subconsciously would have been a demotivating factor to be like, oh
Mhm.
man, fuck this shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
So,
like,
because we were
spent
all done.
so long
Yeah,
on those team brandings,
oh my
spent so
God, yeah.
long on figuring
yeah,
out the format of the league, making the schedule. Oh
getting
my
those
god,
shirt
the
orders.
amount of hours I spent making a double game schedule.
Oh yeah, like that
Hmm.
shit is not easy. So,
Yeah, and
and you know, all the time we spent working with Vector too. So,
yep,
Mm-hmm.
he did
Yeah.
such a good job in that
yeah, he
last
did.
season.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it's brutal. That was yeah. So tough decisions. Still sort of on topic. That entire season 19 was a tough decision. Like
Yeah, and not
everything that
coming back to
happened there.
20.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, not coming. That was brutal. We knew. We all knew
yeah.
that we were done. It did suck.
It wasn't a
None of
decision
us
at the
ever
end of
said it
the
was
season.
over.
It was a
Yeah,
decision like very early on, I feel
yeah,
like, of
Oh
not
yeah.
coming
yeah,
back for
Oh
season
yeah.
20.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
At the end of the
remember.
season, it wasn't a tough decision, obviously, but because like we were
No,
so
we all were
disinterested,
like,
but
"This is it. We're
it
walking
was
away."
brutal to like accept that like it was
We
likely done as soon as we got those finalized draft sheets, basically.
I think
Yeah.
honestly the start of like a lot of people said for a while that the community was on a downtrend, like, or that the community
Hmm.
was dying. That was a phrase or terminology that had been thrown around for a long time in the community in general. But I think season 18, you know, based off the episode we did 2 episodes ago where I showed the graph of player signups, right? Season 18 only having 60 something signups, dropping down from like 90 or 100 or whatever, like that was it to me. Like that was the
Mhm.
red flag that was like, okay, we're
That's why we
fucked.
tried so much. I think in
Yeah,
season 19.
yeah, that's like okay, we're completely done. Like we are so
Yep.
fucked if we don't do something right now. And unfortunately, I think it wasn't too far after that that we had yet another meltdown with Cryptic, which just like just
Yeah.
dig the hole a little bit deeper.
Yep.
Fuck.
You know what sucks too is season 18. I honestly look at that as one of the better. Like it is like a weak season, I think, but it is a better season in terms of competitiveness and parity in the
It
league.
was
It's so
actually, yeah,
it's pretty funny. Like
yeah.
there's no like who
Season
finished last that season?
Toronto, I believe.
Yeah, it was so we had
Yeah,
one
they finished
bad
very bad.
team.
It was one
Yeah,
bad
we
team.
had
Yeah.
one really bad team, but like guys' team who missed the playoffs were so they could have won the cup. They were so good, and Vancouver could have
I mean,
done it. Even
first,
crappy
yeah,
old Florida almost did it.
looking at the standings, I mean, it was
Yeah,
38, 37, 33, 33 for the top four.
yeah,
And
like
the
it
fifth team
was.
missed out by only 5 points, which is like a
Yeah,
game
Not
day.
that significant.
That's a
Yeah,
no,
game day.
it's one game
yeah,
day. Yep.
and I think
Like,
it came down to that last day.
yeah, it definitely did. I remember the rest of that
Yep.
the ending season. I mean, there was so much jostling going on. Of just
Yeah, like
trying to
that
and
was. But unless you were on Toronto, that was like one of the probably better seasons, honestly.
mhm.
Yeah.
And it's weird to me the thought at like 19 is like such a different season in my head than 18, probably more so
I
than any
don't think
other.
like looking back at it objectively, I don't think 19 was bad. Like it
No, I
wasn't
don't think it
quite
was.
as it
No,
wasn't quite as good as 18
I just
was.
didn't
But
enjoy it.
I still think yeah, I still think comparatively and trying to remove myself and my feelings about that season from the equation. Thanks, Eric. I don't think it was really that bad. I mean, we had some displacement in parity, right? With Philly being like 6 points above second place, and then
That Toronto
Washington
team
was
was bad
7 points
again.
above.
Again.
Yeah, but even the Toronto team not being great, the last place team was still only 5 points out of a playoff spot. Like
That Toronto team was
that,
5 points out of a spot.
yeah, like that
That's
actually. If
nuts.
you look at the stand here, I'll bring
Good
it
for
up
them.
on the overview so we can see it. But if you look at the standings, in terms of competitiveness from like most of the teams here, really wasn't that bad. Like the spread's a little larger than what you'd like to see, but the top team isn't like fucking 8 wins over the next
No.
place
And
team,
it
and the
didn't win.
bottom
Like that,
team
yeah.
is only 2 wins out of a playoff spot in a game or in a season that we had 30 games. So they were only two out, which comparatively is not a significant amount in that length of a season.
That's same as
So
that Chicago team missed by the season before.
exactly. So I think again,
That is
objectively
wild.
speaking, that season wasn't as bad as what a lot of us feel like it probably was because we have other opinions about how things were going at that point in time. But even the, I mean, I was on the first seed team and we lost the finals. Like we were up by 6 points, but we still didn't win the fucking cup and we got swept. So
Yeah.
the competitiveness across the board in that season was, I think, a lot better than what we probably remember or give it credit for. So
Yeah. It's just I think a lot of our dislike of that season it comes from. Well, I mean, a couple of people. I know people didn't like Guy didn't have a good time on that the
there's a lot
Chicago
of
team.
people
I know
that didn't have a good
people weren't
time, but
having a
yeah.
good time. I think people weren't having a good time everywhere, but I think a lot of it just comes from I think we all knew it was done. Even the people who didn't really know, they probably could feel it coming.
Yeah.
Oh
And it
yeah,
was just kind of a burnout. Just everything about it was
The lack of
factors in
community
more
did
than
not
more
help.
than the league. Yeah.
absolutely. All right, should
Yeah.
we get closing thoughts in here then?
Yeah, my closing thought: the toughest decision we're going to make is bringing back season 20 next month when we say
Yeah,
it'll be good
good
this
one.
time.
The toughest decision is going to be trying to figure out a new name for the new league.
Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
let's slow down on all this. You're gonna start getting people way
You-
fucking excited. There isn't
know what's
even
funny? I wonder
playoffs for this
yeah,
tournament,
no,
and we
I wonder
can't
if
even
people
convince
listening.
people that
Hold on.
that's the case.
I
Like,
wonder if people listening feel the same thing I went through in our discussion, where when we were talking about the carryover, the draft format, and the prospects, we're like, man, yeah, hey, that'd be good. Maybe we should do another league. But by the end of it, oh yeah, that's why we stopped. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe there's a reason that we stopped playing.
yeah,
Falling
I
back
went
to your
through all
ex.
that. I just went through all that in this
you
discussion.
went through that emotional roller coaster in
Yeah,
this
that was.
hour and a
It was
half.
like,
Yeah,
I was like, whew.
yeah,
Telling me we did another hour and a half.
yeah, we did.
Felt so much for 45 minutes. Oh well.
It was the added person.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. Let's be real. Tony and I would have been in an hour and a half.
You're telling me we
without you.
did 3 hours of Faceoff today, and now I got to go play fucking
Yeah, we
Friday
did.
night hockey on Tuesday.
Hell yeah. It's the start of a new league.
Anyway, any closing thoughts from you, Cap?
No, just thank you for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely.
Yep. Goodbye forever. You will not.
Now
be
that
back.
you used me.
Yeah, it's nice to have a guest on here. We'll see if we can get some more guests in the future on at least like relevant topics like this to them. It definitely, really
Yeah.
made sense in this case to
Why does Jay
to have
Lalu
you
keep
on,
going
so.
first? Lalu, your thoughts?
I'm just upset I can't listen to this episode now.
Yeah, this one
Yeah.
won't be coming out for almost a little less than a week probably.
I don't listen to any of them. I
But-
fucking hate I hate listening to myself.
Me too.
It's
Anyway,
brutal.
yeah. So yeah, thanks again for coming on, Cap. Thank you, Tony. Thanks to everybody who's been listening to all of these. Fingers crossed they keep getting better.
I
But,
hope people listen to the second one, the one between this one and the one that's up at the
hey,
time of this recording.
we'll get at least 5, I'm sure.
Oh hell yeah! I know
Anyway,
Goose
yeah,
will
so
listen.
we're still looking for, more community feedback. Anything you guys can provide, any topics you guys want us to cover, we're happy to talk about pretty much anything. We don't want to be too inflammatory, throwing people under the bus all the time, but we've already called our first guest overrated and criticized several of his draft choices. So we're not
I
above
was
it.
really shitting on Claude in that last one.
We're not above it. So.
Oh well.
But yeah, so we'll continue to come up with some topics. I'm not sure yet what we're going to do for the next one, so I can't give you a dirty little preview now. But yeah, we'll come up with something, and then any community topics we'll try to touch on as well. So anyway, thank you again, everybody. Have a great night, and we will see you on the ice for Friday night hockey.
Now on Tuesdays.